Welcome to Warblog. This is a development video for essentially what I'm calling timelines. I've only done it one scenario so far. Shouldn't need explaining because essentially I have to program each scenario, but you don't know what I'm talking about yet. You don't really know, but when you do, you'll understand. Essentially, timelines are. Might as well just show you. So as you can see, the game is playing itself. So what happens is if you go to a scenario, you sort of think, oh, what's actually supposed to be happening here? Well, you can see here that the Hayat Tahrir Sham are taking these 3 places out. They're pushing these Syrian forces out. You might not play the game in the same way. The reinforcements are coming on a bit odd. They're actually invisible there, and so then they're moving from there and becoming visible there. It's not a big thing. I could speed up the time, but I'm okay with that. But I think for bigger games, it will be a bit, possibly take quite a while. But the thing is, you get the gist of what's happening and the ebb and flow. And this is just a small game, and I've got to I've built the whole thing. I was sort of got up at 6 o'clock and I was just having a twiddle, and I saw these maps on Twitter, and they're in sequence a little bit. It was really hard to see what the progress was, and I thought I could do the same thing on here somehow, and it seems such a difficult thing to do, and that was about 10 hours ago, and I've been at it for 10 hours, and here it is. It works. It's quite difficult to do as well. So, and that's that. I think that's the scenario played through. There's a few things that I'd like to iron out. For example, if you want to do it again, you can't just press that. You've got to refresh the page. Yeah, I just can't be bothered with that at the moment. I mean, I did try. It's sort of, it's just not worth the extra time at this moment, at this stage. But the reason I'm doing this to some extent is now, in theory, I can go back and do all of them. I just think it makes it a little more entertaining, but it's really designed to sort of give you the absolute ebb and flow of what actually happened. And the thing that sort of drove me to it to some extent was, well, to some extent, the Libyan situation, because I could really sort of do that here, but that's not really, I think, the key aspect of it. Essentially, what I'm getting to here is the whole Libyan thing. The Tripoli crisis. This map has been quite static, but they have actually made quite a lot of ground. I mean, at the moment they're up to about there, and each day they take 1 hex. And so for this, instead of doing the same thing again and again, what I could do, each day I could add a bit more to it, so you could actually come to this map and actually see the real life playthrough, what's actually happening. Now on here, the thing is, I wouldn't be moving all of the counters, but the whole idea is that, for example, they've just taken, I think, maybe this hex here or this hex here. So obviously it would have probably taken a few more turns. I mean, they've taken this road here. So as progress is made, I can add that to the timeline, and then you can come back to the Tripoli crisis, and you can watch it through up to date. That's the whole idea, and So it's not playing the game sort of properly. You know, I mean, it's not playing the game properly in the sense that, for example, I can't put the airplanes on. You know, I'm not doing any combat. You know, there's no rationale for why people are losing because I'm not rolling any dice. But it's more, you know, a graphic animation to show you sort of what is in theory has happened. Because of course you might play it very differently. Because of course it is also a blog, and so it's also, you know, trying to sort of cover what's actually happening in the world. You know, for example, this is a real situation, and the timeline, which I'll just play a game just for the hell of it, is actually, you know, pretty much what happened. I mean, we don't really know exactly how it happened, but they pushed the Syrian forces out of these 3 towns and held them for a while, and then the Syrians came back, counterattacked, and pushed them back out. You know, so we don't need to get the odds up on that, so you can see the general ebb and flow. And, you know, I hope to do that with a lot more scenarios. So if you're sort of, you know, if you arrive at this, say, from Google, now, I mean, it probably won't be as intuitive as I might hope, and I don't want to put it on autoplay, because I did think about that, but it's not that important. But you could learn about this battle, you know, it's in perhaps an easier way. You know, I mean, a video would be playing the battle, it wouldn't necessarily be how it happened. But, you know, it could come in, I think, for all of these things, you could come back and say, well, what actually happened here? Because the game might play very differently as to, you know, how it happened in real life. And I'm thinking where this could be really quite useful is in the Vietnam conflict. Not that any of the others are any, you know, less relevant or would benefit in any lesser degree, but I think the Vietnam conflict is actually quite difficult to model. Just to be quite honest, I'll never find the one that I'm thinking of, but there's one in here where you're basically looking for the harvests. There's a few more in this one, I think. No, that's quite a specific one. But the thing is, this is very specific, you see. See, we know exactly what's what. No, I can't actually remember what was what. But they're basically coming here to make up a base, and so we know exactly what's happening. But it would never play out like that because they're very difficult to play out. I think this, I mean, this is just an airbase where they attack the airbase. So, you know, you can show the model of what happened and tell the story, so to speak. A lot easier through the timeline. I don't even know what happened there. Should do some more Vietnam. I haven't done anything other than the news because I'm just so busy. It's unreal, really. But here, this is actually an interesting one. I'm still not happy with the counter, with the terrain X's. I still really want to. I want to make it look nice. It just doesn't look very nice. I think this is because this is what I want to do is put in. I've already got contours, so maybe that would help. But I want to put in themes because this is woodland, but it's very sort of Western European woodland, you know, maybe North American. So I'd have a theme for wooded areas, Asia, and then they would look a little different, so that all the contours fitted in and complemented each other. You know, agricultural would be more paddy field focus as opposed to European fields. But that's something I've been trying to do for years actually now. But in here, these are all really meant to be more sort of, I mean, I've got some irregulars here, but it's more of a search and destroy been going around to all these farms, and so with the timeline you can actually show what happened a little clearer. I'm just trying to find the very specific one. Yeah, that's quite specific. I just looked at that. That's very specific. Can't remember that one. Can't remember that one. It might be this one, you know. Might be this one. So, definitely this one. Swap around. I don't know why I was looking for it here. There it is. Sorry for dragging it out. Yeah, so basically in this scenario, the US forces have to go around and basically, I can't remember really now, but they have to basically deal with all the harvest points, because the Viet Cong go around stealing all the harvests or getting all the harvests, and so it's, you know, that's what they're doing. But it's quite difficult to actually play because you can sort of go around in circles. But if you were to do it sort of intuitively through the timeline, you could actually demonstrate what was happening a little clearer. The other thing that I did think about doing, and I haven't as of yet, because I just thought, well, that would be actually probably something I need to have a little bit more of a think about, but it's something that I've done a lot of before, so I know what I'm doing. But it's audio, so I could actually put in, you know, audio, so that when we get to here, when we get to the bit where there's some combat, I can have some audio line. I just type in a bit of text and say, Hayat Tahrir Sham attack the villages. Syrian units retreat. Hayat Tahrir Sham enter, capture villages. Three hours later, reinforcements arrive, etc. Just strings to sort of actually annotate what's actually happening. I did think of doing some graphics as well, but all this can come in the future. I mean, I've got so many things. The next thing I thought I was going to do would be off-table artillery or off-table area fire, you know, which could include rockets as well. And I was going to do that, and that was sort of my next thing but I was just sitting there in bed, so to speak, and I was just having a little browse 10 hours ago. And quite often these things just, you know, strike me as in a wave of inspiration, and I just sort of thinking, well, okay, it's not the most amazing thing because it's just a bunch of things moving around, but I think, you know, if I could get this on every scenario, and it's going to take a while, you know, to do anything like that, You know, I mean, some of these are so big. The thing is, with something like this, you know, I wouldn't do I wouldn't move all the units. I mean, I might be more inclined to, but for something like this, it would probably take a long time to actually just set up even. You know, and so I think to some extent, and I wouldn't be able to remove these, but that wouldn't really matter because I'll just move straight through them. But to some extent, I was thinking, you know, well, as a result of maybe looking and dealing like this, they can make the scenarios smaller. Not so much smaller as in physically smaller, but sometimes I'm quite liberal with the counters, mainly because I think often the counters add to the graphics, you know, so you can visualize a front line, because quite often there's only really 1, 2, 3 units, and there's huge gaps, you know, because that's not really how they work. You know, they've got a sphere of influence that you could say, which is, you know, quite large. The zone of control isn't just hexes like this, you know, that just the fact that they're on the road is enough to deter the other person from sort of going somewhere. You know, it's not just about lines of supply, but you know, quite often I will put enough to give you a reasonable front line, so that there's no areas where they can just sort of go through, you know, areas where there's no zones of control, etc., etc. So, you know, I'm going to see how it works. It's a bit like the quizzes, I think, because I don't do the quizzes on everything. You know, there's no quiz on this. I haven't done any of the books yet. But anyway, that's another development. So, you know, I hope you sort of think, wow, that's really good. And, you know, and if you don't, you know, play the game, at least you can sort of watch what was supposed to happen, etc., etc. And, yeah, I'll speak to you later. Cheerio.